All right, this week we are going to talk about intentional wanting. We've spent the first couple of weeks of this month talking about defining our needs. And so we're going to move a little bit into wants. We're going to mix it up and talk about wanting. We've kind of established that our deepest needs are pretty simple. There is not a whole lot that we really need. We need food and air and water, shelter and warmth. And we do always have room for growth and improvement. I think a lot of us in the way we feed ourselves and hydrate may have some room for improvement, but for the most part, those basic needs are pretty much met. We have safety needs, and we are so lucky to live in the time and the place that we do because, our lives are not at risk on a day-to-day basis. We have a lot of safety. We need emotional connection, love, and attachment. We need a sense of meaning and purpose, and we need growth in using our strengths and talents. But often we complicate our needs, and we've talked about this. But we mistakenly think or say that we need something when we really just want it, right? We think that we need our children to be happy in order for us to be happy, or we need our house to be clean in order for us to be happy, or we need our husband to bring in a certain amount of money in order for us to be happy, or we need our boss to behave in a certain way in order for us to be happy, right? We say we need things, right? But those are just wants. And then we give the power over our own happiness to things and people completely outside of our control. And this is really an I-it way of relating to the world. It's completely selfish and seeing the things outside of us as objects that either help or hinder us, especially people. Instead of seeing them as people with feelings and needs, we see them as objects that exist to make us happy, to make us feel the way that we want to feel. And a lot of what I'm talking about today and this lesson are things that have been clarified with me or for me by my coach, Jody Moore. And she said, to want and not need, you have to figure out what your specific needs are and then figure out how to fulfill them so you don't need something from outside of you that something or someone else is not willing or able to offer you. Right? We often feel like we need our children to be happy in order for us to be happy, in order for us to feel like we are being good moms. But we don't really need them. But when we attach that to them and surrender the responsibility for our contentment over to our children, we are just setting ourselves up for misery. It's certainly okay for us to want our children to be happy, to have that desire for them to be happy. But then we can still be okay when they aren't. Inevitably, they're going to have hard things happen. They're going to make choices where they have to deal with negative consequences. They may have to suffer because of things completely beyond our control. And when we realize that our desire for our children to be happy is merely a want, not a need, right? We free them of that responsibility and we take responsibility for ourselves. We could need our husband to act a certain way to help with the housework, for example, in order for us to feel happy. We can define that need in that way, and then inevitably he'll fall short and we will be miserable, right? Because we're surrendering that power over to him. Or we can just merely desire that thing. We can just want him to help us with the housework or with the kids or whatever it is that we would want him to do. But then when he doesn't do that thing, we can still feel content, right? We can still feel okay. Understanding needs versus wants enables us to become emotionally self-reliant. Because where do your feelings come from? Your feelings come from your thoughts. They don't come from someone outside of you. So when you have the thought, I need my husband to do the dishes, and then he doesn't, that creates your feeling of frustration or discontent or misery. It has nothing to do with his action. It has everything to do with your thought and your thought of needing him to be a certain way. Things outside of you do not have to change in order for you to feel better. Your thoughts do. When we can have emotional self-reliance, we're free from desperately chasing or harassing or demanding that others change so that we can feel okay, or that things outside of us change so that we can feel okay. Because anything chased is going to run away. And when we're needy and desperate for people or circumstances to change, that actually creates more distance between us and them. When we have emotional self-reliance, we can respect our own sovereignty over our own experience. And then in turn, we can respect that in others. We start seeing them as people with their own needs and their own experience and their feelings that are governed by their thoughts. And this is such good news. It is so liberating to free ourselves from expecting outside things to make us feel a certain way, right? And we can free the people in our lives from the impossible weight of the responsibility over our feelings. And then we can shift into generously offering of ourselves and serving because we're acting from that unselfish, most awake and self-aware place, right? The I-you way of being instead of the I-it. And we can shift from people pleasing to service, right? With that example of needing our kids to be happy or needing people to approve of us, then we act from this desperate place of people pleasing, right? Trying to appease others or make others happy so that we in turn can feel happy or feel better. But when we free ourselves from that, we can just move into service and actually be selfless, right? Can you see how this Needing others to be a certain way in order for us to be happy is really a selfish way of being. When we just take responsibility for our own emotions, when we understand the simplicity of our needs, and we stop defining our needs by the things outside of us, then we can act from a really unselfish place and be free to really serve. Now, this doesn't mean that you shouldn't want things, because we are here to grow and evolve and experience. And desire is a key driver in creating an amazing life. It is okay for you to want things. And really, you should want things. It's natural for you to want things, to have new experiences, to live more comfortably. But how do you feel about wanting things? Sometimes we judge desire as being selfish or worldly or maybe ungrateful, right? Like, I should just be grateful for the house that I have. I shouldn't want to have a bigger house, or I shouldn't want to paint my bedroom a new color. I should just be grateful for how it is. We can acknowledge that what we have is amazing, but still want to see and experience more. It could, right, or maybe our wanting comes from a place of comparison and makes us feel depressed and deprived, that we can't possibly have what we want. And that doesn't feel good either. Or we might think that wanting and gratitude are just in opposition to each other. But that is not the case. Wanting and gratitude are not in opposition to each other. We live in an amazingly, infinitely abundant world. There is more than enough for our needs and our wants. And so you can think of it this way, right? I remember being a young mom and having one baby, loving her more than life itself, being so grateful to have the child that I had, and wanting another baby, right? Just because I was wanting another baby, it didn't mean I was ungrateful for the child that I already had. Wanting and gratitude are not in opposition. Another example of this that I heard from Jody is about, like going on a trip. You could be so grateful for the home and the comforts that you enjoy in your day-to-day life, and still want to go somewhere new and explore and have new experiences. Just because you want to go on a vacation or want to go explore Europe or go on a hiking trip doesn't mean that you're not grateful for what you already have. When we're grateful for what we have, we can act from a place of understanding the abundance of this world, and our wanting can be really intentional and joyful. And it's how we create a more amazing life. Because the more you have, the more you can give. What we focus on becomes what we create. And we often focus on what we don't want, because our brain's default mode is to scan for problems so that it can keep us safe, right? That's what our lower brain is designed to do. But what we focus on is what we become, and it's what we create. So focusing on what we want gives our brain a problem to solve that is creative and productive. So I'm sure you've all heard of this little illustration before. Because what if I say, don't think of a pink elephant? I say that and you think of a pink elephant, right? What if I say, don't think of a pink elephant, instead think of a white kitten? Now, you probably thought of a white kitten, but you're probably also thinking of a pink elephant, right? You have both of those thoughts in your mind. It would be better if I just said, think of a white kitten. If that's the thing that I want you to think about, I shouldn't say what I don't want you to think about, because you're going to focus on both of those things. Or you might actually be more hyper-focused on the thing you don't want. So that's just how our brains work. They won't take away the don't. They might actually fixate on that a little bit more. And then we end up creating what we don't want in our lives, right? Because our thought line always ends up in our result line. What we think about and focus on is always a part of the result that happens in our lives. So, what do you want? Setting goals gives your brain a problem to solve. So, we'll talk quickly here about how to set a goal. First, you need to define the goal and be as specific and quantifiable as possible when you define your goals. So here's an example. I will be ready to run a half marathon by June 10th. That is specific and quantifiable. Or I will lose 45 pounds by September 1st. Right? Now it's got to be realistic. If September 1st were tomorrow and I was going to set that goal, that would not be a very realistic goal. But if that was 9 months away, certainly I could set that kind of a goal, right? Or maybe even 6 months away. I will respond to my kids without yelling 9 times out of 10 by the end of the summer, right? And then you'll have to figure out some way to measure that. Excuse me, but we can make goals in all sorts of areas of our lives. Maybe you want to create a business or earn a certain amount of money or create a certain number of podcast episodes, right? Anything like that. You can define your goal in a really quantifiable way. Okay, the second step in setting a goal is to coach yourself until you're operating from useful emotions. Because as soon as you set a goal, especially if it's a goal that's a challenge, your brain will be full of reasons that you can't do it. So you need to run some models on that. You need to make a thought download, write down all those reasons you can't do it. See what feelings you're creating for yourself. See what result will come of those thoughts. And then think of your future self that has achieved that goal. Think of how you feel when you've lost those 45 pounds by September 1st, right? What are you thinking when you've become that future version of you? What do you think and how do you feel? Because you will need to think in those and feel those things now to be able to take the action you need to achieve your goal. Often we think we need to beat ourselves up into improving. But if you really understand that the thoughts that you think are always going to end up in the result that you create, it just doesn't make any sense to think, oh, you're such a failure, you better get in shape, or whatever it is. Any kind of self-reprimand or self-judgment or self-hatred or loathing in your thoughts will never end with a positive result, right? So you need to work from your future self as if you've already achieved your goal. And then you need just to list all of the obstacles to reaching your goal. You probably will have something like, I don't know how. I don't have time. I can't afford it. I've never done it before. I'm afraid I might fail. And just let yourself do that. Let yourself list everything that comes to your brain about why you can't do it. And then write a strategy to handle each one of your obstacles. For example, you have the obstacle, I don't know how. So you make a specific, schedulable, doable strategy to overcome that obstacle. Spend 2 hours this Monday at 11 researching and figuring out the first steps to take. Research every Monday until I know enough to get started. And then you do it, right? Here's another obstacle. I'm afraid I will fail. Strategy for overcoming that obstacle. Coach myself by writing a thought download and doing a model about my goal every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning to keep my mind in the right place. Reach out to my coach for coaching, right? Often, coaching, self-coaching is the strategy to overcome your obstacle. Okay, the next step is to schedule your strategies and follow through. But you have to realize that you will probably not feel like doing your tasks when Monday at 11 comes around, or whenever it is that you have scheduled to do your thing. You will probably not feel like doing it, right? Because your scheduling comes from your higher cognitive, wise part of your brain, that part of you that has your future in view and your highest possibilities in view. But your in the moment, seeking pleasure, avoiding pain and discomfort brain is the one that will probably be balking at what it is that you've set forth to do. And they'll probably say, this isn't necessary. I don't need to do this right now. It's really going to be too hard, right? And you'll just say, I hear you, brain. I know you don't want to do this right now, but I'm going to do it anyway. You just do it anyway. And that is how you make amazing things happen. You're going to feel some opposition or some discomfort, but then you do it anyway. And that's how you set and reach a goal. It's so important to understand the distinction between needs and wants and realize that you can feel good no matter what is happening outside of you. I know I've talked before about Viktor Frankl and his book Man's Search for Meaning. And Viktor Frankl was a survivor of the Holocaust. He was a psychologist and was taken prisoner and just stripped of all of his dignity, living in a concentration camp. And I just want to read a little bit of what he says in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. This is kind of the part where he's making some analysis about the experience. And he says, I may give the impression that the human being is completely and unavoidably influenced by his surroundings. But what about human liberty? Is there no spiritual freedom in regard to behavior and reaction to any given surroundings? Is that theory true, which would have us believe that man is no more than a product of many conditional and environmental factors, be they of a biological, psychological, or sociological nature? Is man but an accidental product of these? Most important, do the prisoner's reactions to the singular world of the concentration camp prove that man cannot escape the influences of his surroundings? Does man have no choice of action in the face of such circumstances? And then he answers his question. He says, the experience of camp life show that man does have a choice of action. There were enough examples, often of a heroic nature, which proved that apathy could be overcome, irritability suppressed. Man can preserve a vestige of spiritual freedom, of independence of mind, even in such terrible conditions of psychic and physical stress. We who lived in the concentration camps can remember the men who walked through the huts comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. It says, the sort of person the prisoner became was the result of an inner decision and not the result of camp influences alone. Fundamentally, therefore, any man can, even under such circumstances, decide what shall become of him, mentally and spiritually. He may retain his human dignity even in a concentration camp. When we really understand that our feelings come from our thoughts and not from the things happening outside of us, we have so much freedom. It's such good news. We also need to understand that reaching for what we want just enriches our experience. It expands our capacity and enables us to give more to the world. So here's your homework for this week. Make a long list of what you want. And there's a little more on that worksheet. There's a bunch of places for you to write what you want and then a few other questions about that. And then set a goal. Think of all of your obstacles. Create some strategies to overcome those obstacles and schedule them. And then coach yourself. It'll be awesome. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.